There is one moment in God of War where everything you thought you knew about Kratos gets flipped on its head, and I genuinely cannot tell you what it is without ruining it. But I will say this, it changed how I understood the entire game. And 8 years later, sitting here in 2026, that moment still hits just as hard as it did the first time. That is not something you can say about a lot of games anymore. God of War came out in 2018, and it was already an old franchise by then. People had seen Kratos tear apart gods for over a decade, so when Sony Santa Monica announced they were rebooting the whole thing, a lot of folks were skeptical. A new camera angle, a new setting, Norse mythology instead of Greek. It felt risky. And honestly, for the first few hours, it felt like a completely different game. But here's the thing. It was a completely different game, and it was better. The developers did not just slap a new coat of paint on an old formula. They tore everything apart and rebuilt it from the ground up. And the confidence it takes to do that with a franchise people already loved is something you genuinely have to respect. Most studios would not touch that. Santa Monica went for it anyway, and it paid off in a way nobody fully expected. The combat is where this game lives and breathes. You play with an axe called the Leviathan, and the way it feels in your hands is just satisfying from the very first swing. You can throw it, call it back, chain hits together, and every single action has weight behind it. There is no button mashing here. You have to think, you have to dodge, and you have to read your enemies. The shield bash is one of the most underrated moves in the game, and if you're not using it constantly, you're making things way harder than they need to be. Every enemy type teaches you something different. The Draugr force you to stay patient and time your attacks. The elves are fast and they punish you if you get lazy. The trolls are massive and you have to figure out their patterns before you can even scratch them. And then there are the boss fights. Without giving anything away, some of them are among the most toughest and most memorable encounters I have experienced in any action game. There is one fight in particular that I replayed 4 times, not because I was stuck, but because I just wanted to feel that moment again. Later in the game, when you get a second weapon, the combat opens up even more, and it almost feels like a different system entirely. Some people loved that shift. Some people felt it came too late. I fall somewhere in the middle. But what I will say is that by the time the credits roll, the combat feels like a complete system, and it took real skill to pull that off without the transition feeling jarring. The controls are tight and responsive the entire way through, which is something that a lot of action games get wrong, especially on console. What grabbed me more than anything, though, was the story. Kratos is not the screaming rage monster you remember. He's quiet now. He's careful. He has a son named Atreus, and watching these two figure each other out is genuinely one of the best character dynamics I've ever seen in a video game. Atreus is not just there for decoration. He's part of the combat. He helps in fights by shooting arrows and calling out enemy positions, and more importantly, he drives the emotional core of the entire narrative. The way he grows throughout the game is subtle but constant. Early on, he's nervous and unsure of himself, always looking to his father for guidance. By the end, he's someone completely different, and Kratos has to deal with that change in real time. That tension between them never really lets up, and it's the engine that keeps you invested from start to finish. There is a reveal about halfway through that recontextualizes everything, and I'm still not over how well they handled it. But what people talk about less is the character of Freya. She shows up and immediately becomes one of the most interesting people in the story. The layers they built into her motivations are the kind of thing that makes you want to sit with the game long after you've finished it. She's not a simple character, and that matters more than people give her credit for. The world design in this game is stunning. The 9 realms feel alive in a way that was impressive even back in 2018, and looking at it through a 2026 lens, it still holds up remarkably well. The art direction was clearly built to age gracefully, and it worked. You're not moving through one big open world. You're jumping between distinct locations via the Bifrost system, and each realm has its own personality. Midgard feels ancient and decaying, like a world that's been holding its breath for centuries. Muspelheim is brutal and unforgiving, all fire and aggression. Niflheim is shrouded in fog and chaos, and every time you enter it, it feels like a gamble. Environments are dense with detail and mythology. You can walk past something on your way to the next objective and notice a carving or a piece of lore that adds another layer to the world without ever interrupting the flow of the game. Side quests actually matter here. They're not filler designed to pad out the runtime. Some of them build out the lore in ways that connect directly to the main story, and a few of them push you into some of the toughest fights in the game. The optional Valkyrie fights deserve a special mention. There are 9 of them scattered across the realms, and they are some of the most hard encounters you'll find anywhere. Tracking them all down and taking them on is one of the best reasons to keep playing long after the story ends. If you skip them, you're missing out on some of the most satisfying combat moments in the entire game. The RPG systems are solid but not deep enough to be called complex. You upgrade your gear, level up abilities, and make small choices about how you build your character. It works and it keeps progression feeling earned, especially on higher difficulties where every small advantage counts. The gear system encourages you to experiment, and finding better equipment scattered throughout the world gives you a constant reason to explore, but it never becomes the main reason you're playing, which is fine because the main reason you're playing is everything else. If you're looking for something with the depth of a full RPG, you won't find it here. What you will find is a system that stays out of the way and lets the rest of the game do its job. The sound design and music deserve a specific mention because they're doing heavy lifting in this game. The orchestral score is heavy and emotional in exactly the right moments. It never overstays its welcome, and it never tries to tell you how to feel. It just amplifies what is already happening on screen, and the result is an atmosphere that stays with you after you put the controller down. The quieter moments between fights are just as well crafted as the intense ones, and that balance is harder to achieve than most people realize. And the voice acting, particularly from the 2 leads, is some of the best work you'll ever hear in this medium. These aren't actors reading lines off a page, they're living in these characters. The chemistry between them carries entire scenes that have 0 action, and those scenes are somehow just as compelling as the fights themselves. Now, by 2026 standards, this game is not technically flawless. It ran well on PS4 at launch, but compared to what modern engines can do, some textures and effects look a little dated up close. The PC port that came out later helped a lot with frame rates and visual fidelity, and if you haven't played it on PC, that's the best way to experience it now. But it's still an 8-year-old game at its core. The art style is what saved this game from aging badly, though. Because they chose a stylized look over chasing pure realism, it's held up in a way that hyper-realistic games from the same era simply haven't. You can see other studios following that same logic now, and honestly, it's one of the smarter design decisions Santa Monica made. The replayability is decent, but not exceptional. Once you finish the main story and clear out the optional content, there's not a huge reason to go back. The game is really a one-time emotional experience more than anything else. That said, knowing what happens changes how you experience the early game in interesting ways. Small details that seemed throwaway on the first playthrough suddenly make much more sense the second time around. The endgame challenges are tough and fun if you're into that kind of thing, but they won't pull you back the way the story did on your first run-through. If I had to point to a weakness, it would be the pacing in the final act. Things pick up speed very fast toward the end, and some story beats feel rushed compared to how carefully everything was set up before them. It's not bad writing, it's just not as tight as the rest of the game, and after spending so much time with the slower, more deliberate pacing of the earlier chapters, the shift is noticeable. There are also moments where the difficulty spikes without much warning, and if you haven't been grinding or leveling up properly, you'll hit a wall that feels unfair rather than challenging. Neither of these issues is a deal breaker by any stretch, but they're worth knowing going in so you're not caught off guard. But here's why God of War 2018 still matters in 2026. It proved that you can take something old, strip it down, rebuild it from scratch, and end up with something that feels completely fresh without losing what made the original work. A lot of games have tried to do what this game did since then, and very few have pulled it off with the same level of care and polish. It set a new standard for how stories can be told in games, and you can see its influence everywhere now. The sequel, Ragnarok, expanded on almost everything this game built, and while that's a conversation for another time, the fact that it had such a strong foundation to work from says everything you need to know about how well this original game was put together. This is not just a good game from 2018, it's a game that shaped what came after it, and that kind of lasting impact is rare. God of War 2018 earns a solid 5 out of 5 for me. It's not perfect, the pacing stumbles in the final stretch, the RPG layer is a bit thin for people who want more depth there, and the final act doesn't quite match the emotional build of everything before it. But the combat feels incredible and responsive from beginning to end. The story is one of the best ever told in this medium, and the relationship between Kratos and Atreus is something every game developer should study. It's a masterclass in doing one thing really, really well, and that's more than most games ever achieve. If you've somehow never played this one, go play it. If you played it back in 2018 and moved on, it's absolutely worth revisiting. Either way, this game is not going anywhere anytime soon. If this review helped you decide or just reminded you why this game is special, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment down below and let me know, did God of War change how you see video game storytelling the way it changed it for me? And if you know someone who hasn't played this yet, share this video with them. They'll thank you later.